forward. It's unusual to write an autobiography at 34, especially if the author is someone we wouldn't commonly refer to as a celebrity. Hamza isn't a celebrity, but he certainly deserves to be known. His brilliant and singular journey as a precocious entrepreneur and a warrior in the face of illness, narrated here with humor and self-derision, is proof enough that passion and determination are powerful tools to realize one's dreams. This is a book to be read and shared with those at the bottom of the class, their parents and teachers, and any entrepreneur seeking inspiration. I can count on one hand the number of books I've read, and I sure never thought I'd be writing these words to you right now. What led me to publish an entire book when just a few months ago I'd hardly written a word in my life? I received an email out of the blue in June 2020. In that email, a publisher associated with a well-known media company invited me to produce a book about my experience as an entrepreneur. We agreed to meet to discuss the project, and during the meeting, I discovered that their proposal was actually for me to pay $50,000 for them to do most of the work and put my name on it. Naturally, when it comes to making an investment that big, you want to know what the return on investment will be, so I asked, and they said the ROI was authority, plain and simple. To be honest, that didn't sound very promising to me. Would it really be worth it if I didn't even know whether anyone would read the thing? But once the seed of publishing a book was planted in my mind, there was no turning back. And yet, the more I considered their offer, the more I realized that I didn't want to buy myself a book. I wanted to write my own book. I guess that's been the story of my life all along. By that point, my heart was set on making it a reality, and I immediately started planning how to do it my own way. Just as I dreamt up the numerous businesses I've owned, I started with an idea and built on it from the ground up. Of course, I'd hardly written a word in my life, and I thought writing a book would be a piece of cake. I set a timeline of 3 months to complete the whole project. I spent the first 2 weeks designing the cover. I started drafting an outline, and I came up with the title based on an old blog post I had written about my experience with cancer. I launched the website. I even set an official release date. Now there was really no going back. Well, believe me, it's a lot harder to write a book than I ever could have imagined, even with the brilliant team of people I recruited to help with the details. As it often goes in life, the unexpected happened and crucial aspects of the project fell through with hardly any time to spare. I saw the project falling apart before my eyes. There were moments I was sure we'd never make it to the scheduled release with anything resembling a book. With just a month to go, all I had was the rough draft of half a book. And in that moment, it occurred to me that writing a book is no different than any other project. I had to bring my A-team on board, and like a miracle, we made it happen. It's because I did things my own way, my own unconventional way, that you hold this book in your hands right now. Not just any book, but this book. Luckily, I believe writing this book was going to be easy. If I hadn't been so optimistic, surely I would have abandoned it before I had even begun. The way I see it, life is full of closed doors. Unfortunately, we'll never know what's behind them if we don't open them. It's only because I opened that door to see what was behind it that we find ourselves here on this very page together. I'm glad you're here. Now let's go for a ride. Introduction. I consider myself one of those lucky people who are blessed with a once-in-a-lifetime wild idea that completely changes their life. When that idea hit me, I didn't hesitate or fear the possibility of failure. I just made the decision and walked right toward it. I was unlike my peers, hacking into servers and making the World Wide Web my home before most people even owned a computer. From a young age, I followed my gut and passions, even when everyone around me thought I was a failure or a misfit. I've never been afraid to do things my way. By taking risks, I've made irreversible decisions and faced my fair share of stumbling blocks. It's also thanks to those risks that I've enjoyed the taste of success. I started my first business at the age of 17, only to fail high school the next year and drop out of college a few years later. Every decision I've made and every act of fate that's happened to me has led to another opportunity unfolding in front of me, just waiting for me to take it. As unconventional as some of my decisions have been, I still own that thriving business today, along with a few other side projects born of my twin passions of food and technology. This book will take you from my childhood home and cybercafes in Marrakech, Morocco, to Paris and Lille, France, to the halls of Harvard and back, with plenty of side trips along the way. Not only will I open to you on a personal level, I'll also share my secrets for success, many of which stemmed from failure. Through the anecdotes and lessons in this book, I hope to encourage you to take your own risks and open the doors you chance upon in the great maze of life, if only just to see what's behind them. You don't have to do things perfectly. In fact, if you ask me, perfectionism is one of our greatest flaws. Indeed, those who seek perfection are destined to stay right where they are. Reject perfection. All you need is the will to do things. Don't be afraid. Open the door. If you don't look to see what's there, you'll never know. From start-upper to cancer fighter. Chapter 1. Criminal. I hated school. It wasn't just a surface-level hatred, but a deep, severe loathing. Growing up, I loved experimenting and learning new things, but unfortunately, learning was the last thing I did in school. I wasn't the best elementary student, pulling other kids' pants down when I was just 10. I classified my extracurricular activities as terrible accidents. I was always getting into some kind of trouble, whether I meant to or not. One time, a classmate and I were roughhousing in the schoolyard when I accidentally broke one of his teeth. Life has always had its way of teaching me a lesson, and it seems I got what was coming to me after that. Call it karma or call it revenge. But the next week, some friends and I were playing basketball when out of nowhere, that same classmate's cousin threw a rock. Whether he meant to throw it at me, I'll never know. That rock hit me smack in the face. And guess what? It broke my tooth. That day, I learned that every time you do something bad, it'll come right back to bite you in the ass like a boomerang. You can imagine that I was always getting into trouble with my parents. Here I was, they thought, the sweet Hamza they had raised with morals and character. Character? I was a character, that's for sure. Yet, despite my mischief and the fact that the school dean would eventually characterize me as the child of the devil himself, the truth is that the only real conflict that ever arose between my parents and me was academic. My father was a doctor, and my mother was a teacher, and they wanted me to share their drive to do well in school. I never felt like they understood my complete and utter boredom. Nothing excited or thrilled me. There was nothing I thought was worth putting my mind to, certainly not at school. For all my shenanigans, I wasn't a bad kid. But like I said, the dean and nuns at the Catholic school I attended believed otherwise. One day, my mom got a call from the dean, a nun who to this day has never seemed to age beyond her perpetually advanced years. "Your son is a criminal," she explained to my mother over the phone. By the pensive expression on my mom's face, she was processing the news. She wasn't upset. Of course, she wasn't thrilled either. Her mood was hard to read, to be honest, and to this day, I'm still not sure what thoughts were running through her mind. "We're going to have to suspend your son for 3 days. He's a criminal, and you should really consider taking him to a shrink." And so my mom did. Being the supportive woman she is, she took me to my first appointment with the therapist. I remember that session, and the ones thereafter, like it was just yesterday. One thing you should know about me is that I have the memory of an elephant. I can recount every detail of those appointments, down to the color of the walls. The therapist asked me generic questions, like what I did at school and whether I was having fun. Mostly she asked me how other people treated me, how I reacted, and how it made me feel. I couldn't be bothered. I didn't care a lick about what happened at school. After 3 appointments with the therapist, I was disappointed to learn I wasn't as exciting as the nuns believed. At the end of the day, I wasn't actually a miscreant. My parents raised me well. It's not like I was sneaking into the school lab to blow things up with the Bunsen burners. It was through those therapy sessions that I realized my mind worked a little differently than my peers. I needed to be presented with a challenge in order to learn, and I wasn't being challenged enough. So I created my own challenges, but we'll get to that later. It turned out I didn't have a criminal mind, and I wasn't the spawn of the devil himself. I was just a normal, bored kid who needed more stimulation. They said there was a possibility I'd grow out of it. I didn't. One time, when my parents were traveling outside the country for 3 weeks, my Aunt Jamila, peace be upon her, who took care of me as a baby, and my Uncle Eunice came to stay with us. It was nice for my parents to be abroad for a change, because it meant my siblings and I had more liberty, and plus, we were excited for them to bring us gifts when they returned. We had asked for a Game Boy. One day during those 3 weeks, my French teacher slapped me just before school let out. No one, least of all me, knew why. When my Uncle Eunice picked me up from school and saw her handprint on my face, he asked me what had happened, and I told him it was nothing. My classmate, Hamza B., may he rest in peace, overheard my uncle's question and explained what had happened. Uncle Eunice waited in front of the school for the teacher. As she reached the main gate, he stopped her and told her, "Next time you touch this boy, I'll kick your ass." I love him for that to this day. If my father had been there, he would have made sure I got a mark on my other cheek without so much as asking what had happened. Anyway, I survived the wrath of elementary school. Thank God I didn't get expelled from middle school, though I probably would have found plenty of ways to entertain myself. And as for high school, nothing, and I mean nothing, was worse than having my mom as my high school physics teacher. That is, for her anyway. As for me, I enjoyed myself. It was too easy to make my poor mother miserable. This probably marked a low point in my bad behavior. I couldn't say a word without turning it into a joke. I was always seeking attention. One time, my classmates and I made my mother so upset that she suspended the whole class for the day and asked us to bring our parents the next day. I couldn't help asking her, "What about me?" People told me to change. The thing is, we all have the ability to change, but only if we want to, and I didn't want to. My behavior conveniently overshadowed the fact that I wasn't doing well academically. I preferred getting into trouble for being Brody over being called inadequate, a slacker, or my favorite, a failure. So I continued not to apply myself. It's no surprise that I flunked high school. It's not like I ditched my final exams, or even that I tanked them. At least I had the decency to bless my teachers with my presence on the last day. What happened was that I needed 10 out of 20 points to pass, and I got 9.96. My poor sweet mother. You'd think she'd have freaked out and beat me with the textbook in hopes of transferring knowledge into my head, but instead, she was incredibly supportive, as though my mother could ever hurt a fly. Her temperament has always been that of an empress, poised, refined, a woman with a golden heart. She, unlike other people in my life, always knew my heart wasn't in the academic world. She had no real interest in changing me. Her reaction was to share a verse that, at the time, made no sense to me. But perhaps you hate a thing and it is good for you, and perhaps you love a thing and it is bad for you. Quran, verse 2, chapter 2:16. As for me, failing my senior year by 0.04 points gave me a new perspective on things. I was disappointed, but I didn't let it shake me. You see, I didn't really study that year. I knew that had I applied myself, had I earned those measly extra points in any one subject, I would have earned my high school diploma. Meanwhile, my dad, The same dad who would have stopped my French teacher from leaving a handprint on my face surprised me with his reaction. He hugged me and told me everything would be alright. I hadn't imagined for a second that he would be that supportive. I truly believe that everything, good or bad, happens for a reason. I know it can be hard to believe, especially if bad things keep happening to you. I can see why some people hesitate to trust that everything happens for a reason. But I, for one, was eager to find out what good could come out of this seemingly bad situation. I choose to find meaning in both the good and the bad in my life, and I decide which attitude I'm going to have at every milestone. I try to give meaning to every life experience so it doesn't have to be so black and white. In reality, life is gradients of gray. Every day I push to be better, despite my mistakes, and there are lots of them. Eventually, everything falls into place as it should. It just might not take the path you originally envisioned it would. For me, my path was away from school and toward computers. My mother probably saw this before I did. First time I touched a computer was in the French Institute of Marrakesh. I was about 7 or 8, playing Prince of Persia on a 1992 Macintosh. And the first time I ever used the internet, I was changed. My big brother Rahel took me to my first cybercafe back in 1997. I think my first internet search was animal related. In fact, next to my love for computers, which had only just begun to grow, I loved animals of all kinds. Cats, dogs, pigeons, you name it. Whenever I found a stray kitten or puppy in the street, I would bring them home and offer them food and shelter. And above all, love. To this day, my love for animals hasn't changed a bit. But it turns out I'm more of a dog person. But back to computers. By the time I was 11, we finally had a computer of our own at home. It was a Pentium 2 with 128 megabytes of RAM, running Windows 95 that my mom bought for my older brother Rahel. The PC was in our living room, and I would sneak out of my room at night to use it. I played strategy video games like Age of Empire and Age of Mythology. I might have trailed my peers at school, but I could build a village better than any other kid in my neighborhood in Marrakesh. Video games were where I learned my strengths and how to accomplish bigger tasks by breaking them into smaller missions. I would invest in particular armor, maybe a new naval fleet. I'd network with other players to earn more gold and collect enough wood to keep my people going. When I wanted to buy more time on the internet, literally, when it came to cybercafes, my mother let me. Even after we had our own computer, I made the cybercafe my second home. The connection was faster there, and plus, I could have LAN parties with my friends. I'd spend 6 to 7 hours a day at the cafe, often skipping school. Sometimes I'd even pull all-nighters at one of the 24-hour spots. If my parents couldn't find me, they knew where to look. I was hooked because my parents had given me so much growing up. When I was 15, I decided it was time for me to step up and learn how to provide like my dad. It was when I learned how to hack that I was finally able to give back to my family. I scored our household free internet for almost 2 years by hacking into the main internet service provider's ISP system and creating fake prepaid dial-up accounts. Illegal? You bet. I had found a way to log on to the platform that the ISP's own sales team used to create internet accounts. Once I was in, I created a bunch of accounts that came with 99 hours of internet. After the 99 hours were up, it would bill for each additional hour. Luckily, I used fake names and fake addresses. I still remember the sound of the modem connecting and its 56 kbps bandwidth. It was the slowest internet ever, but it was free, and I couldn't complain. This was before DSL. Once there was DSL, I had to get more creative. For a short time, it worked. And luckily, I was a teenager at the time, so the possibility of me getting into serious trouble was low. Actually, who am I kidding? I could have gotten into a lot of trouble. Hacking was easy for me, too easy. Everything else in my life was a blur. It was like walking through a fog every day, trying to find something to do. I might not have known my purpose at the time, but I knew I enjoyed technology. Part of me wished that I enjoyed other things because I could have saved myself from a lot of lectures growing up. But in reality, we don't all love the same things. And in my case, I didn't like anything except video games and hacking my way through life. When I was in middle school, a teacher told me, "You will not succeed, not this year, not in your life." Yeah, well, alright, thank you. Come again soon. That's never easy to hear. But I'm not the type of person to get discouraged. I know everything settles where it should. And thanks to my family's unconditional support, I was aware of my worth. I didn't know how to apply myself yet, but instead of demotivating me, that teacher's comments triggered something inside me. I wanted to prove him wrong. This time in my life reminds me of that Think Different Apple advertisement. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, no. And they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do it. I'm one of the crazy ones. I was an awful student, and I definitely didn't fit in, but I believed I could do something great. I wanted to be that person who made a difference, even in a small way. At 15, I was turning into a little entrepreneur. I illegally hacked into a server and sold a shell account for $5. And once money was involved, I realized I could get into serious trouble. It was time to celebrate. Screw the people who called me a failure. This was money, real money. I was a moocher no more. Now I wasn't just giving away free stuff. I was earning the big bucks. It might have only been $5, but this marked a huge achievement. For once, I wasn't stalled or moving backward. I actually saw some type of beginning, and it excited me. I wasn't sure if anyone else saw that same thing, but so what? I was thrilled to be making some money, and I didn't want to stop there. My head reeled with thoughts of the future. I was curious to see where I could take this. Could I make a living off of hacking? How long exactly could I hawk shells from this server without getting arrested? But before I got too far ahead of myself, I would need to collect my hard-earned cash. When I arrived at the money transfer office, the woman at the front desk smiled at me. "How can I help you today?" "I want my money." Just kidding, I didn't say that. Being the professional entrepreneur I was, I replied, "I would like to collect my $5, please." "I can certainly help with that. Can I see some ID?" I gawked at her. "My what?" "I'm Hamza," as if that qualified as identification. I was a godforsaken 15-year-old. How was I supposed to have an ID? There was no smooth talking my way out of this one, nor did I have a way of hacking their system to finagle things around. No ID, no money. My heart sank. So that was it. My first money-earning experience was over, just as fast as it had begun. Her words echoed over and over in my mind, like some sort of cruel and undeserved punishment. But then she leaned forward and placed her hands on the counter. "If you don't have an ID, you can bring 2 people who can identify you as long as they have their IDs. Before she could even finish, I ran home, grabbed my mother and aunt, and we marched right back to the office. The 2 of them signed on my behalf, like it was nothing. It was surreal. I remember that day vividly, even the colors of the floors in that place. A smile so big it reached my eyes, and my cheeks were numb. My mother and aunt were miserable, as per usual when I was around, because the process to sign on my behalf took nearly 20 minutes. Hey, I couldn't help that it was a complicated process. It was the best day of my life. My tinkering had a tangible effect, and one that paid in cold, hard cash. Every day since then, I've striven to do better and better. I seek out uncomfortable situations in order to grow. That day, I was off to the races, and I never wanted to look back. The world of technology I fell into was the one place I felt I belonged. I was addicted to hacking. Rather, I was addicted to overcoming something, anything, by myself. My mom and my aunt had my back that time, but the next time, maybe I wouldn't need help. So I pushed for that small milestone. At 15, I was still spending hours at cyber cafes. Hacking was my way of learning and improving my skills, and IRC was my school. I started learning English, since most of the content was only in English back then. When I first started out, there was no Google, and I used to spend hours on Yahoo directory looking up everything I needed to know. I spent sleepless nights learning how to hack into servers. I researched what actually happened when I typed a domain name in the address bar, how a DNS server worked, how an MySQL server handled database connections, how a web server handled different host names. I learned all of that by myself. It wasn't easy, and that's what I loved about it. I wanted to unravel the mystery behind technology. I figured that if I knew how to destroy a web server, figuratively speaking, I might also know how to build one. And that was the essence of web hosting. If you think like this too, then you'll understand the beauty of disassembling something and putting it back together. And to be frank, I thought of this as an opportunity. But hacking didn't pay much back then, and it was also seen as taboo. It was the first time for me to turn from a black hat, bad hacker, into a so-called white hat, a good hacker. In 2003, it was still the early days of the internet in Morocco. The technology was more advanced in the US and other developed countries. I was 17 by this point, and my thousands of hours at cyber cafes, many of them spent researching the inner workings of the internet itself, culminated into a sudden prescience about opportunities on the horizon. I knew we'd eventually get into that level of internet penetration in Morocco, and at the time, there were very few hosting companies in the country. I had already earned those $5 thanks to my obsession with the internet, and I was sure there must be more where that came from. This was the first time I thought about creating a company, and I wanted it to revolve around web hosting. All I needed was a name, and I gravitated toward génie, the French word for genie. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Aladdin was, and still is, my favorite Disney movie. I like this word because it was mysterious and implied solutions. Plus, it sounded badass. But I didn't know its English translation. My friend and cousin Omar, who was living in the US and a much better English speaker than I was, told me it meant genius. He pointed out it also meant genie, like the genie in Aladdin. But I was immediately drawn to genius. That wasn't half bad for a first try at a name. I know entrepreneurs who spend years trying to come up with a perfect name for exponential growth. My process was simple. Genie made sense in at least 2 languages, and the 2 English translations of the French word were pretty cool. But when it came to buying a domain, genie and genius were already taken, since they were popular keywords. Of course, I would run into an issue, just like in anything in life. And to fix it, I tossed an O in there. Genius.net was born. Years later, I found out that the spelling of ingenious had an O. What are the odds of that? Business names are crucial, I will admit. You might have the coolest name in the world, but not a soul can pronounce it. Or there might be unwanted hidden meanings behind your catchphrase. A company name has the potential to make or break a business. After all, relationships are built on first impressions. And because a business name is the consumer's first impression, a lot goes into creating that name. Simply thinking of a company name off the top of your head, like I did, isn't always the best strategy for a brand. Back when I came up with the name Genius, I didn't think about those things. I'm happy that it turned out I chose well, but at the time, I never stopped to ask myself, will people remember me or forget me? At the end of the day, the name found me, not the other way around. And really, I only chose it because there was an available domain for it. Call it fate. There was no meticulous planning or domain searching. It just felt right, and I acted on my gut. That's how I started approaching everything from that point forward. Looking back, it's crazy how one moment can seem to define you and your future. But that's the thing. Life is made up of lots of single moments. Nothing has to last forever if you don't want it to. You can build something from nothing if you're willing to learn and take risks. And luckily for me, I love taking risks, and I accepted that things might not go as planned at first. But in the end, they would. I'd make sure of it. To be frank, I had nothing to lose. I was on the verge of failing high school, and entrepreneurship was a new path for me. And deep down, I had a feeling that it might just turn out alright, because I spent high school largely playing hooky at cyber cafes and ultimately chose my new business over school. My parents couldn't brag about my brains or slap honor roll bumper stickers about me on their cars. Instead, they supported me when I decided to start my company at 17. It turned out they weren't disappointed when I pursued my passion. At least I was putting my mind to something. If I could go back and graduate high school with my peers, I don't know if I would. I don't regret the way things happened. And plus, if I had graduated that first year, things would have turned out very differently for me. I know my parents might have liked to see me succeed the first time around, but I was in a different mindset and a completely different place in my life then. I didn't want to follow the traditional path carved out for every Moroccan, that is, one dedicated to education and research. Graduating high school on time would have left me stagnant, at least in terms of my business. Sure, I might have grown personally by experiencing that rite of passage alongside my peers, but I doubt my family would have been able to tolerate me for long had I been forced to focus on school at the expense of what I was truly passionate about. I know my opinion is different from that of the majority of the world that prioritizes education, but failing my exams allowed me to focus on my company's growth. And besides, at the time, I was preoccupied by something else entirely. I needed to get out of Morocco. I had only just started my business, and I already had hit a critical roadblock. I needed to pay for my clients' domain names and hosting services, which required international payments. Yet local regulations in Morocco prohibited payments to foreign countries. I needed a way out, and by the time I attempted my exams again the following year, I had already been accepted to a university in Lille, France. The events of my life continuously opened new pathways for me, and I seized the opportunities that felt right. The next step for me after finally passing my exams was to go to France and really kick off my company. I was excited for university too. This would be a new opportunity for me to experiment and expand my business. The best part was that now I wouldn't have to hit up my brother Rahal in Tahiti to pay for services on my behalf. That would have been embarrassing.